This is Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. Now, beginning with our first discussion today, in the midst of huge investment in agriculture, the federal government said it spent $1.68 billion on food importation between January and September in 2021. Recall, $1.68 billion. Now, this was contained in a Central Bank of Nigeria report on sectoral utilization of foreign exchange for the third quarter of last year. According to the Apex Bank report, the government spent $163.60 million, $197.73 million, and $171.05 million in January, February, and March, while the $156.30 million, $135.72 million, and $213.58 million were spent in April, May, and June by the government. Now, the report also revealed that $184.69 million, $188.88 million, and also $271.59 million were spent in July, August, and September last year. Now, a development economist, Dr. Ibrahim Bello, joins us in the studio. He is also the principal partner, CEO, PVG Consult Limited, and he is going to be giving us perspectives on this. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you. Good morning.
Welcome to the program.
Well, quite interesting looking at this, trade between Nigeria and other countries in terms of importation of food. One would think that by now we should have gone past this stage. This is quite huge. $1.68 billion are spent, yet we see the cost of food on the rise in the country. Give us a sense of the correlation there.
It's a huge figure, really, to have gone down on the sector of importation. But this is not unique to Nigeria. It's more of an African issue. The developing countries in the world have become more of a dumping ground of importation of food. There are a lot of factors that together culminate to, pinning Nigeria specifically to be more of import dependent on food. Now, what type of food are we importing? What sectors dominates the importation? If you look at the statistics, the class of people or sector, like I said, that majorly import are not the people that are classified as the masses. They are the end users of the imported products. What do we import? Cereals, such as maize, sorghums, herbs, barleys, and the rest of them. Soybean, poultry products, dairy products, meats, etc. Now, the bulk of those imported food products, some goes to the manufacturing sector, wheat, for instance. Some are ready-made products that goes directly to the market, like the canned food products. And some complement our food production deficits. So overall, there are justification to some extent, and there are more of reasons not to justify the importation. It's all about policy and discipline in implementation of policies and resource allocation and utilization.
One will say that we've seen huge investments in the agricultural sector in Nigeria in recent times, especially under this government, under this current administration. A lot of money, doled out to farmers. The Anchor Borrowers program, for instance, monies have been, given out in trillions, to farmers and all of that. And we're still having this conversation. What is missing?
If you look at The Anchor Borrowers Scheme is a good example. Now, before the government came out with the Anchor Borrower Scheme, Nigeria's total rice importation is almost 90 or so percent. I don't have the specific statistics. But today, give and take, that gap has been reduced. We're not there yet, but a significant progress has been made in the area of rice production locally. But the problem there is, you are talking of production, yes, but what about the rice seedlings? Do we produce the seeds? Because you need the seed to produce the rice. The bulk of our seedlings are imported. I doubt if we have the capacity to produce local seeds up to 70% of our needs in terms of self-sufficiency in rice production. So it's just like the renewable energy sector. When you say you are producing a compliant car, but the product that is used in producing the batteries is creating another climate issue. So it's more of robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of scenario. So in the rice sector, the government should invest, to me, more on seedlings, local capacity to, boost seedlings production. Because if you're not in control of the production of the basic raw material that, pushes you forward, you are getting yourself into another vicious cycle. Fine, you produce the rice, but you don't produce the seeds. So you'll have to import the seeds. It doesn't make sense. It's just like the petroleum. You export the crude and bring in the refined products.
Okay. Now, with all of these challenges outlined, where would you say Nigeria is with achieving food sufficiency?
Food sufficiency, it's something that is not, as easy as it is said. Because, let me give you a scenario. The past 2 years have been, globally, we have been faced with a huge challenge of COVID-19. Now, how has it impacted the entire global economy? Agriculture being one of the major. In Nigeria, there are the factors affecting us as a country. It's not only unique to our local challenges. Global trends impact on our own processes. You are talking of policy, funding, execution, supervision, monitoring, and other things that goes into the production chain. Now, corruption and lack of political will and sheer indiscipline and our problem of, patriotism as a people. Because a lot of Nigerians are not patriotic. People find themselves in positions of power or influence. And the first thing they think of is how to either enrich themselves or apply emotion and sentiment in their decision-making processes. Now, when you bring those to bear, it cripples every positive policy or system the government tries to implement towards the betterment of the country at large. So, food sufficiency is attainable, but the factors that you put in place to get there is what we have to look at. Like I said, from policy down. Now, take an average farmer who has maybe 2 hectares. He wants to cultivate cereals. The first thing there is how to tilt the farm. Does he have the capacity, tractors and other implements that he needs? He needs seeds. Like I said, do we have the capacity locally to produce enough seeds to, feed the farmers that are both locally and the mechanized ones. Then you look at pesticides, insecticides, and other chemicals that goes into making sure that his crops grows properly. We import almost 80, or I don't have statistics like I said, but we import the larger part of those, agri basic implements and chemicals. Then you look at storage of those, then the impact of the dollarization of our economy on the system. Then transport. If you take it out of the farm, you have to take it somewhere. So there are many sectors of the economy that affects food production.
All right, now, well, this is where we are in 2022. Recently, the president, granted an interview, and he spoke quite a lot. And one of the issues that he talked about is the fact that we have only 2.5% of Nigeria's arable land being cultivated. Yet we have a huge number of people unemployed, and all of that. How much time do we have? I mean, are we just realizing that now? And what can we do to maximize, these potentials, that we have?
It's a very small percentage compared to the vast fertile land we have and relative to our population. I believe Nigeria has enough land to cultivate food to not only feed Africa, but also play a role in the global food chain. But again, what are the impediments that are standing on the way of Nigerians towards achieving food sufficiency? It's the same factors we said. You see, in all sincerity, whatever policy and goodwill the government will put in place, there are certain key things that needs to be done. Like I said, we need to take out emotion, sentiment, and selfish interest in our decision-making processes. This is the genesis of most of our challenges. The president may have a good, vision towards a particular sector of the economy. He is very passionate about Agric. It's one of his key areas where he intends to make a huge impact. But the drivers of the policy, do they have the same commitment as the president? Those implementing those policies, are they patriotic enough?
But some would say that these people answer to the president. That's why he's the president. He has all the powers to sack whoever does not show enough commitment.
I agree. Like I said, Nigeria's bureaucracy is very huge. The government is doing its best, no doubt about it. But, example, you have now, presently, people will blame insecurity on having an impact on our food production. But before insecurity, we are still grappling with food production. Insecurity is just a factor that came in between at the middle. So if you take away insecurity today, we're still going to fall back to the same problem, availability of fertilizer. Because what are the impediments? It's the same problem. Availability of fertilizer, affordable. Availability of farm implements, affordable. Availability of affordable, chemicals to treat the farm, the crops against pesticide, pest and other things. Transport problems, storage problems. It's the same thing we will continue to outline over and over and over again. Now, the government pushes out billions every year towards the provision of this to make sure that subsidizing fertilizer, importation of tractors and giving it at subsidy, importation of seeds, sometimes giving it free, You understand? Now, the process of approving, releasing, implementing, and getting it to the basics to those who actually uses this as end users, that is the chain. That is where the problem is. Now, the president needs to put his feet down and, you know, more sense of discipline and enforcement of performance indices.
Which is why some people are having the feeling that maybe because the president is not really, you know, monitoring as he should, maybe that's why we're not seeing results in some of the beautiful policies, you know, that have been introduced.
I don't want to look at it in that manner. You see, it's the system is more complicated. Sometimes it's easy to look at it from the spectator's angle. But when you are in government, it's quite different. Nigeria is a very complicated, diverse, you know, country. One of the major challenges we have as a people, I will keep on saying this, is our, you know, we have lost our sense of patriotism as a people. Let me give you a scenario. An average Nigerian today driving on the road, what do you think is the percentage, 1 to 10, that likely beats traffic?
Quite
I'll say
a number.
8 in 10 will beat the traffic.
Jumping the queue in filling station, in banks. Now, the sense of indiscipline, we as individuals, you know, display, goes to show you the level of problems the leadership is having. It's an individual problem. Is the president going to fire the entire civil service? Is he going to fire everybody down the line? The next set of people he brings in, would they not behave the same way? So it's more complicated than we are looking at it. Because Nigeria's problem is not only a government problem, but it's an individual personal problem. Because we've lost our sense of patriotism. Most people, rather than to do things when they find themselves in position, the right way, without being told to do it, prefer to create more incentives for corruption by, you know, the Agric officer who is supposed to make sure that fertilizers that are subsidized goes to the farmers, who is at the local government level, for instance. That, you see, is not the responsibility of the president. If you ask an average young person today on the street, what is the difference between trunk A, trunk B, and trunk C roads? Some of them don't know. Most of them, in fact, don't know. Now, if the road behind his house has an issue, he calls the president, because he doesn't know that that road belongs or is the responsibility of the local authority or the state authority. If there is not enough information to sensitize Nigerians to know the levels of intervention of various tiers of government. Now, if the responsibility of the president is to approve, let's say, 400 billion, remember, the end users of that 400 billion are at the local government level. And once the disbursement gets to the state, it is at a point the responsibility of the president and his authority over those funds reduces by more than 70%, because states now takes more responsibility because they are now in custody of those funds. Now, how they disburse it to the local authorities who are going to now ensure delivery, again, reduces the influence of the president along the chain. So you have to look at the tiers of government and the protocols by law on how some of these funds are disbursed, how they are utilized, at what sectors they are utilized, and who takes responsibility, whose job it is, and does the president have responsibility over that person? If each state is supposed to be given, let's say, 50 billion, and that 50 billion gets to the state governor, the president loses out at that point, because the governor is not answerable to the president. What the president can do is to lobby and continue talking. He cannot arrest the governor. He cannot fire the governor. It now depends on the governor's will to be patriotic enough to make sure the mechanisms at his state takes responsibility in disposal.
Okay. Now let's talk about genetically modified foods. How does genetically modified foods actually contribute to achieving food sufficiency?
Genetically modified foods, otherwise known as GMO, it's a concept developed by science because they have projected that in 50 years' time or so, the population of the world will outgrow our food production capacity. Now, if you look at what is happening today, desertification, ecological problems, natural disaster problems, wars, and other varied, problems are reducing the capacity of the world to produce enough food. Africa, we are lucky to a larger extent, but the story is not quite the same with other parts of the world. So the projection is there's a time they are afraid that the world may face severe food shortage. So what will be the stopgap? Now breeds the idea of now going to the lab to temper with, or to modify, so to say, the capacity of, let's say, a stock that is producing 1 stock of maize to produce 10. You are increasing the yield capacity of foods using scientific methods. Now, what they should be able to do, it's a good concept, but the fear most people have is, what impact does it have on the health of people that are going to be, consuming those products? Is there enough statistics to prove safety of long-term use of GMOs or genetically modified foods? So there are some questions that needs to be made available to the public to put in more confidence on people in order for them to accept GMOs. But right now, it's more of a health challenge. People are afraid and skeptical about taking it.
All right. Now, let's look at local solutions to some of these problems. Earlier, you talked about, farm inputs, and access to that, how it's a problem, for our farmers and all of that. Fertilizer, equipment for mechanized farming, tractors and the likes. Are we looking into local solution in terms of investing, in the production of some of these things, and how much have we done?
That is why the president is, putting a lot of energy and funding into agriculture. Now, what I will advise the government to do is to invest more on research. You see, research is the backbone of development. The America, the Chinese, and the superpowers today are where they are because they heavily fund research. Now, the problem is, in this part of the world, we are used to, the fire brigade quick method approach. We want to put 1 billion today and get the result by Wednesday next week. Research doesn't go that way. It takes years because you are trying to prove an idea or to convert an idea into reality using scientific methods. You cannot just wake up and produce seeds. It's a research process that takes about 10, 15, 20 years. When will we start is the problem. And how committed are we going to be on them? We have a lot of, research that have been going on locally. We have different varieties of seeds that are being produced locally. But are they being encouraged? There are money bags that have exerted monopoly on the system to, downplay the efforts of government. So the government should do more in checking such interest to make sure that locally researched products in terms of inputs are brought to bear on the system. And then, you know, we have intellectuals at the lower level whom have come up with innovative way of supporting agric mechanization and food production. It's going to be a lot of work, but the government have to be more committed in balancing the system between vested interest and public interest. These are the problems. Vested interest is more weighing down
the impact
of government, you know, investment towards agriculture, and is impacting on public interest.
In any ways, how do we deal with this vested interest? You know, in most cases, you see that these are politically high-profile persons, and so to get things done, you know, really, you have to do away with this, and it's becoming almost impossible to navigate the politics, you know, around, you know, our economy, you know, in this sense. So, how do we deal with that?
It takes a lot of political will to do that. Again, the issue of patriotism comes in. Because if you are a leader today, you will face a lot of challenges. But when you remain persistent and committed to delivering value, you will have to find a way to sit with these people, educate them, and bring them back to speed. There are more ways you can get them engaged. For example, they can fund research. This GMO thing we are talking about is funded by private sector. It's not a government, largely not a government-funded activity. It is the same vested interest somewhere that came together and funded that, you know, processes. It depends on how the government relates with them. If you bring them closer and discuss with them and task them as a government to deliver on certain sectors, most of the times they do, because they have the capacity to do it. But when you allow them to go on their own and define their space, then you get on, you know, collusion with their interests, and you have problems. Regulation is there, for example, on the imports. Companies import wheat and convert it to flour. Companies import maize and convert it to this and that. These are not the masses. They are just the end users. The government's responsibility there is to regulate and make sure that when they do, their process does not have negative consequences on the people, because what they're after is profit. And for instance now, it has become almost difficult, not impossible, to import some of these things because of the value of, you know, our FX to Naira. And the masses or the lower level people in this country are the ones that are taking the hit, because these people will have to make their profit. And so they transfer the cost to the people of Nigeria. So what role is government playing at that level? It's a complicated process, because government does not have enough funding to subsidize that at that rate, because you're talking of, you know, giving dollar at a lower you know, rate for them to get these raw materials locally here. And if government is going to push to produce wheat locally, a lot of those factors we analyzed earlier will now kick in. So I think it has to be a combination of teamwork between government. Government has to find a way to bring these people closer and to get them to invest more on local research, local production, rather than import.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program today and sharing your thoughts with us. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We've been speaking with the Director General, Sahelian Center for Leadership and Development, Dr. Ibrahim Bello Dauda. He is also the principal partner and CEO of PVG Consult Limited. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
All right.